Late-night Walmart runs. They seem harmless, right? What if I told you that beneath those buzzing lights and quiet aisles something unexplainable is waiting? Tonight, we unravel terrifying true stories that will make you see your local Walmart in a whole new light. Before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your own chilling experiences in the comments below. Who knows? Your story might just be featured next. Let's step into the shadows. They always say to expect the unexpected, but I never imagined a mundane trip to Walmart could change everything. It started as a normal evening, a quick stop to pick up groceries after work. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, the store almost eerily quiet, except for the occasional squeak of cartwheels. I didn't know then that by the time I left, I would question everything I thought I knew about the world. I grabbed a cart and wheeled it aimlessly down the aisles, my mind half focused on the list in my hand. The usual assortment of shoppers shuffled past. Families with kids in tow, tired workers like me, and a lone elderly man staring too intently at a can of soup. Nothing seemed out of place until I reached aisle 13. At first, I didn't notice anything strange. It was stocked with pet supplies, shelves of kibble, chew toys, and cat litter. But then, I realized something felt off. The air seemed heavier, almost like the atmosphere had thickened. My chest tightened slightly, and a faint chill crawled up my spine. I brushed it off as fatigue, convincing myself I just needed to grab the cat food and move on. But then, I saw it. A shadow flickered at the far end of the aisle, just beyond the range of the lights. It was quick, barely a blur, but enough to make me freeze mid-step. I stared down the aisle, straining my eyes, but everything looked normal again. Shaking my head, I chuckled nervously to myself. Get a grip. It's probably just your imagination. I reached for a bag of cat food when the shadow darted again, this time closer. My heart jumped. It was no trick of the light. Someone, was moving at the edge of my vision, always slipping away when I tried to focus. I called out, my voice echoing unnaturally in the empty space. Hello? Is someone there? No response. But then, a faint scratching noise, like nails dragging across the metal shelving. It sent a shiver through me, my fight or flight instinct kicking in. I wanted to leave, but my feet refused to move. My curiosity, or maybe my fear, rooted me in place. I gripped the cart tighter, inching forward. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. It sounded as though it was right beside me, yet the aisle remained empty. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the sound stopped. I exhaled shakily, convinced I must be imagining things. But then, the lights flickered. Not the usual gentle hum of a fluorescent bulb, but a harsh, strobing effect that plunged the aisle into alternating darkness and blinding white light. In one of the flashes, I saw it. A figure crouched at the end of the aisle, impossibly tall and thin, with limbs that bent in unnatural angles. Its eyes, or what I think were eyes, glowed faintly, reflecting the flickering lights, and it was staring straight at me. I couldn't breathe. My body finally listened to the primal urge to run, and I turned on my heel, abandoning the cart. My footsteps echoed in the silence as I sprinted down the aisles, desperate to find another person, anyone. But then, the store seemed endless. Aisles looped back on themselves, familiar sections morphing into something unrecognizable. My pulse pounded in my ears as the fluorescent lights dimmed further, casting the store in an otherworldly glow. Just when I thought I'd never find my way out, I stumbled into the produce section, where a lone employee stood stacking apples. Gasping, I rushed to him, trying to explain what I'd seen. He gave me a puzzled look, tilting his head slightly. "You were in aisle 13?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with something. "Yes, something is back there," I exclaimed. "You need to call someone." He didn't answer. Instead, he glanced past me toward the aisle I'd just fled. His expression turned to one of quiet resignation as he muttered, almost to himself, It doesn't usually let people leave. Before I could ask what he meant, the lights above us went out completely. In the darkness, I felt a cold, inhuman hand grip my shoulder. And then, nothing. The next thing I remember is waking up in my car, parked outside the Walmart. The clock on the dash read 3:33 a.m., though I'd only gone in around 7 p.m. My phone had no signal, and my receipt showed no purchases. I don't go to Walmart anymore, and if you ever find yourself in aisle 13, I'd suggest you keep walking. Whatever is there, it's watching. There's something about late-night trips to Walmart that feels oddly peaceful. The quiet hum of the refrigerators, the faint buzz of overhead lights, and the absence of chaos. That's why I went that night. I needed a break from everything, a chance to wander aimlessly through the aisles and clear my head. But I didn't realize I'd walked straight into something I couldn't explain. It started with the cart. I'd barely made it through the automatic doors when I saw it. An old, rusted shopping cart standing alone in the middle of the entrance. It didn't match the others. Its metal frame was bent and discolored, and one wheel wobbled at an odd angle. I almost ignored it and grabbed a newer one, but something about it felt wrong. But then, it moved. I swear I wasn't touching it, but the cart jerked slightly, rolling forward a few inches on its own. A chill ran through me, and I laughed nervously, glancing around to see if anyone else had noticed. The cashier at the front was scrolling on her phone, oblivious. Shaking my head, I pushed the thought aside and took the cart. The wheels squeaked loudly as I pushed it, the sound grating against the eerie quiet of the store. I wandered through the aisles, picking up random things I didn't need, trying to ignore the growing unease that seemed to settle in my chest. But then, I started hearing whispers. At first, I thought it was a radio somewhere, faint voices barely audible above the hum of the store. But the more I walked, the clearer they became. It wasn't music or a commercial. It was something else. The whispers sounded fragmented, like pieces of a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Help, please. The words were soft, almost drowned out by the squeaking wheels. I froze, my hand gripping the cart tightly as I glanced around. There was no one nearby. The aisles were empty, and the cashier was nowhere in sight. Hello, I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. No response. But then, the cart jerked in my hands. It pulled forward, harder than I expected, like someone was yanking it from the other side. My heart pounded as I let go, watching it roll on its own down the aisle. It stopped abruptly in front of the cleaning supplies, and for a moment, everything was still. I approached it cautiously, every instinct in my body screaming at me to turn around and leave. As I got closer, I noticed something. Faint handprints smudged into the metal frame of the cart, like someone had been gripping it tightly. And then, the whispers returned, louder this time. Don't leave. It's here. The lights overhead flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally. My breath caught as I realized one of the shadows didn't belong to me. It was tall, thin, and humanoid, standing just behind the cart. My legs refused to move as I stared at the shadow, unable to look away. And then, slowly, it turned. There was nothing there. But the cart began moving again, rolling backward toward me as the whispers rose to a crescendo. I stumbled, turning to run, but the aisles seemed to stretch endlessly. The shelves grew taller, the lights dimmer, and the air colder. Finally, I reached the exit, bursting through the doors and collapsing onto the pavement. When I turned back, the store looked normal. Bright lights, busy shoppers, and the faint sound of a cashier announcing the total for an order. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the entrance as if it might come to life. And then I saw it. The cart. It was back where I found it, rusted and bent, as though it had never moved. I don't know what I encountered that night, but I've never gone back. Late at night, though, when everything's quiet, I still hear whispers. They say you shouldn't shop when you're tired. Your mind plays tricks on you. I used to believe that too, until the night I saw something I can't explain. It wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't my imagination. Something was in that Walmart, and it wasn't human. I was walking through the store late one night, picking up a few essentials after a long shift. The aisles were deserted except for an employee restocking shelves at the far end. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead was oddly soothing, and the cool air from the freezer section felt like a relief after the day I'd had. I turned into the frozen foods aisle, scanning the shelves for ice cream when I noticed it. At first, I thought it was just a person. Someone hunched over, digging through one of the freezer cases. Their back was to me, and they were moving slowly, almost deliberately, like they were looking for something specific. Late night snack hunt. I joked, trying to lighten my own mood. They didn't respond. But then, they moved. It wasn't like a normal person shifting their weight or turning around. The movement was jerky, unnatural. Their limbs bent in strange ways, and as they slowly rose to their full height, I realized just how wrong this was. The figure was too tall, its shoulders brushing the tops of the freezers. Its arms hung low, unnervingly long, with claw-like fingers that clicked softly against the glass door. My heart skipped a beat as it turned toward me. At its face, if you could call it that, was a pale, featureless expanse of skin. No eyes, no mouth, just a blank canvas stretched tight over a skull-like shape. But I could feel it watching me, an intense predatory awareness that made my stomach churn. I froze, gripping the cart so tightly my knuckles turned white. The thing tilted its head, as if curious, and then it stepped forward. Its long legs moved with a sickening, spider-like grace, closing the distance between us far too quickly. I backed up, my breath catching in my throat. "Hey, stay back," I shouted, though my voice sounded small and weak in the cavernous silence of the store. But then, it smiled. A slit opened across the blank expanse of its face, impossibly wide and filled with jagged, uneven teeth. The smile was wrong, too human, and yet not at all. It crouched slightly, its claws scraping the tile floor, as though readying to pounce. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. The cart clattered to the floor as I sprinted down the aisle, my footsteps echoing in the empty store. I didn't dare look back, but I could hear it. The soft click, click, click of its claws on the tiles, chasing after me. I turned a corner sharply, nearly slipping, and dove into the first hiding spot I found. A narrow gap between two shelving units in the canned goods aisle. My chest heaved as I tried to quiet my breathing, every muscle in my body screaming to keep running. But then, the store went silent. No footsteps, no buzzing lights, nothing. It was as if the entire world had paused. Slowly, I peeked out from my hiding spot, my heart hammering in my chest. The aisle was empty. I exhaled shakily, relief flooding through me, until I heard it. A low, guttural sound, like a growl mixed with static. It came from above. I looked up, and there it was. The creature was clinging to the ceiling, its head twisted at an impossible angle to stare down at me. Its claws dug into the metal beams, and that horrifying smile stretched even wider. Before I could scream, it dropped. I don't remember much after that. The next thing I knew, I was outside, sitting in my car with the engine running. The clock on my dashboard read 4:04 a.m., though I'd only been in the store for 15 minutes. The worst part, when I looked back at the store, it was bustling with people. Families, employees, shoppers, all going about their business like nothing had happened. But I know what I saw, and every time I close my eyes, I see that smile. I should have known better than to go grocery shopping so late at night. The Walmart parking lot was nearly empty, save for a couple of cars, their owners probably working the graveyard shift. I just needed a few things: milk, bread, and some cereal. Nothing out of the ordinary. but what happened that night was anything but normal. It started innocently enough. I wandered through the store, the aisles mostly deserted. The overhead speakers played a soft, scratchy tune I didn't recognize. The only other sound was the distant beeping of the self-checkout machines. After gathering what I needed, I made my way to the self-checkout lane. Out of habit, I chose the farthest machine, the one closest to the wall. It was oddly comforting, tucked away from the rest of the store. But then, it began. The machine welcomed me in its monotone, robotic voice, "Please scan your first item." As I placed the milk on the scanner, the screen flickered, just for a second. Static lines danced across it before returning to normal. I brushed it off. Old equipment, I thought. But then, the voice changed. "Did you find what you were looking for?" it asked, the tone oddly conversational, almost human. I froze, staring at the screen. That wasn't part of the usual script. Shaking it off, I scanned the rest of my items quickly, eager to get out of there. But then, it spoke again. "You shouldn't be here." My hands trembled as I looked around, expecting to see an employee pulling some kind of prank. But the store was silent. The other machines stood dormant, their screens glowing faintly. "Excuse me," I muttered, half laughing at how ridiculous this was. The screen flickered again, and for a moment I saw something. A face, pale, with hollow eyes and a wide, unnatural grin, staring at me from the monitor. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my wallet. "Please, don't leave me," the voice said, softer now, almost pleading. I slammed the help button repeatedly, hoping a worker would come over and fix whatever glitch was happening. Instead, the machine let out a harsh, distorted screech. The lights in the store flickered, casting long, warped shadows across the floor. And then, everything went silent. The air around me felt heavy, almost suffocating. I turned to leave, but as I stepped away, the machine's screen turned black. A single word appeared in bright, blood-red letters. "Stay." My heart pounded as the other self-checkout machines lit up one by one, their screens showing the same twisted face I'd seen before. Their robotic voices echoed in unison, distorted and overlapping. "Stay, stay, stay." I bolted, abandoning my groceries and sprinting toward the exit. The automatic doors didn't open immediately, as if the store itself wanted to trap me. When they finally slid apart, I stumbled into the cold night air, gasping for breath. As I looked back, the store was dark, the self-checkout screens glowing faintly through the windows. But the faces, they were gone. I don't know what that thing was or why it targeted me. But now, whenever I drive past that Walmart, I can't help but feel like it's watching me, waiting for me to come back. I wasn't planning to stop at Walmart that night. It was late, nearly midnight, and the parking lot was eerily empty. Just a few scattered cars sat under the flickering lights, their shadows stretching unnaturally across the asphalt. I only needed a couple of things. Nothing that should have taken more than 10 minutes. But then, I saw it. It started as a feeling, like I was being watched. I glanced over my shoulder as I grabbed a cart from the corral, expecting to see someone. Instead, the rows of cars loomed in the dim light, empty and silent. I told myself I was imagining things and hurried inside. The store was quiet, almost too quiet. The usual hum of late-night activity was missing. No distant chatter, no sound of carts squeaking against the tile floor. Even the music over the speakers seemed muted, as if the building itself was holding its breath. I moved quickly through the aisles, grabbing what I needed, but the feeling didn't leave. In fact, it grew stronger. My every step was accompanied by the faintest shuffle behind me, too soft to be footsteps, but just loud enough to set my nerves on edge. But then, I caught a glimpse of it. At the end of the aisle, just out of the corner of my eye, something darted past. It moved on all fours, long and gangly, with pale skin that seemed to glisten under the fluorescent lights. My heart pounded as I whipped my head around, but nothing was there. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky. No answer. I pushed the cart faster, telling myself I just wanted to finish and get out. But every turn I made, I felt it. That presence lingering just beyond the edge of my vision. When I finally reached the checkout, the lone cashier gave me a half-hearted smile. She looked exhausted, her eyes hollow. "Late night, huh?" she said, ringing up my items. I nodded, too rattled to make small talk. As I left the store, the chill of the night hit me, sharper than it should have been. The parking lot was deathly quiet. The flickering lights seemed dimmer now, casting long, distorted shadows. My car was parked near the edge of the lot, far from the store's entrance. And that's when I saw it again. It stood between two cars, just far enough away that I couldn't make out the details. Its form was humanoid but wrong. Unnervingly thin, its limbs elongated. Its head was tilted at an odd angle, and though I couldn't see its face, I felt its eyes on me. I froze, my keys slipping from my hand and clattering to the ground. The sound echoed unnaturally loud in the empty lot. The thing moved then, stepping into the light. Its skin was a sickly, grayish white, stretched tightly over its bones. Its arms were impossibly long, nearly dragging on the ground, and its legs bent backward, like a predator ready to pounce. But it was the face that paralyzed me. Hollow black sockets where eyes should have been. A gaping mouth filled with jagged, uneven teeth. And then, it smiled. The grin stretched impossibly wide, as though it were mocking me. My legs finally obeyed, and I bolted toward my car, fumbling with the door handle. Behind me, I heard the sound of claws scraping against the pavement, quick and deliberate. I threw myself inside and slammed the door, just as the thing lunged. Its claws raked across the window, leaving deep, jagged scratches in the glass. It pressed its face against the window, its breath fogging the glass as it stared at me with those empty sockets. Somehow, I managed to start the car and peel out of the lot. In my rearview mirror, I saw it standing in the middle of the parking lot, its head cocked to the side as it watched me leave. I never went back to that Walmart, but sometimes, late at night, I swear I see those hollow eyes watching me from the shadows, waiting. Late-night Walmart runs were supposed to be boring, mundane. A quick in and out for milk, eggs, or whatever else you'd forgotten during the day. I always preferred the quiet of those hours when the store was nearly empty. But after that night, I'll never go back after dark. It started innocently enough. I was heading toward the clothing section, looking for a cheap hoodie. The store was almost deserted, except for a few employees stocking shelves and a couple of night owls browsing the aisles. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, and the PA system crackled with static before announcing a sale I didn't care to listen to. But then, I saw the mannequin. It was taller than the others, tucked away in the corner of the women's section. At first, I thought it was just an older model they hadn't bothered to replace. Its limbs were slightly discolored, and its face was more detailed than the smooth, generic ones nearby. It had sculpted cheekbones, sunken eyes, and even faint lines around its mouth, almost like it was trying to mimic a real person. I passed it without much thought, rifling through a rack of hoodies. But as I turned to head toward the fitting rooms, I swear, it was closer. It hadn't been near the rack before, but now it was only a few feet away, angled slightly toward me. I stared at it for a moment, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe an employee had moved it while I wasn't looking. But then, its head turned. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The movement was slow and deliberate, the kind you can't mistake for a trick of the light. Its hollow eyes seemed to lock onto mine, and for a moment I was too stunned to move. I took a shaky step back, bumping into a display of jeans that sent a pair tumbling to the floor. The sound startled me, snapping me out of my daze. "Okay, nope, I'm done," I muttered to myself, turning and walking as fast as I could without breaking into a full sprint. But then, I heard it. Soft, shuffling footsteps, faint but distinct, coming from behind me. I whipped around, heart pounding, and there it was. The mannequin was standing at the end of the aisle, its arms hanging limply at its sides, head cocked to one side. This time I didn't wait to see if it would move again. I ran. The shelves blurred as I sprinted through the store, my sneakers squeaking against the polished tiles. I didn't care how ridiculous I looked, I just wanted to get out. But the sound of those footsteps didn't stop. They grew louder, faster, almost frantic, as if it were chasing me. I risked a glance over my shoulder and felt my stomach drop. The mannequin was running. Its movements were jerky and unnatural, like a marionette being yanked along by invisible strings. I reached the front of the store, where a lone cashier stood behind the register, scrolling on her phone. "Help, please," I shouted, waving my arms frantically. She looked up, confused, and I turned to point at my pursuer. But the mannequin was gone. I stood there, gasping for breath, my eyes scanning the aisles behind me. Everything was still. The store was quiet again, save for the faint hum of the lights. "You okay?" the cashier asked, raising an eyebrow. Yeah. I thought I saw something." I stammered, my voice shaky. She shrugged, clearly unimpressed, and went back to her phone. I didn't waste any more time. I left my cart behind and bolted out the door, my heart still racing. As I reached my car, I glanced back at the store one last time. And there it was. The mannequin stood just inside the entrance, perfectly still, its hollow eyes watching me. But now, it was smiling. I've never been back to that Walmart. I can't explain what I saw, and maybe I don't want to. But sometimes when I walk past store windows at night, I catch a glimpse of something in the reflection, something standing just behind me,